Bruchim Haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom. The Gemara previously brought the pasuk from Yeshaya Hanavi, V'chibaretoi, and you shall honor the Shabbos. And the Gemara says, how shall you honor the Shabbos? By wearing Sheyemalbushcho Shel Shabbos Lo Yeh Malbushcho Shel Chol. Your Shabbos begodim, your clothing that you wear on Shabbos should not be the same type of clothing that you are wearing during the week. The Gemara now says, bringing a pasuk in regards to Yeshaya Hanavi, he foretold the destruction of Sancherev and his soldiers. V'tachas kevoidoi yekad yikoid yikikoid eish. And v'tachas kevodo, it says, there'll be a fire that will burn and blaze a fire, destroying the soldiers of Sancherev. Om Rabbi Yochanan, v'tachas kevoido. These words, v'tachas kevoido, is v'tachas kevoido v'lo kevoido mamish. Rabbi Yochanan learns it's referring to their clothing as kevoidoi. That is a person's honor. V'tachas means underneath his honor, referring to then his body. The bodies of the soldiers are going to be burnt. Rabbi Yochanan l'taimei, and this is Rabbi Yochanan according to his reasoning, as we saw before, the Rabbi Yochanan kori lemane mechabdusi, that Rabbi Yochanan would call his clothing those that honor me. In other words, when a person wears clothing, they give him respect, the clothing themselves, and therefore he called them those that honor me. So here in the pasuk, tachas kevoidoi refers to underneath his clothing. That's Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation of the pasuk. Rabbi Eliezer oimer v'tachas kevoidoi means tachas kevoidoi mamish. Here refers to kevodo, his body. He disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan that it's not kevodo referring to the clothing, but rather kevodo, his body. And tachas over here means in place of. So in place of his body, they will be burned. In other words, there'll be ashes. Both interpretations, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, both learn that the body will then be destroyed, but the clothing will be intact. The significance of that is because Sancherev was from Ashur, and Ashur was a descendant of Shem ben Noach. And therefore, Shem ben Noach, because of his proactivity in covering his father Noach, by taking the Simla and covering his father, so therefore, Mida Keneged Mida, HaKadosh Baruch Hu repaid his descendants, and here that their clothing should then remain intact, although their bodies will be destroyed. Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, our third opinion, tachas kevoido, it's a combination of the previous two. He learns tachas means underneath, and kvodo, he means, is going to be his body. So therefore, kisreifas b'nei ha'aron, like the burning of the children, Nadav v'Avihu, the children of Aharon. Ma lahalon sreifas nishama v'guf kayom, afkan sreifas nisham v'guf kayom, just like the body was kept intact in regards to Nadav v'Avihu, and the fire burned their neshamas, so too the soldiers of Sancherev, the fire will burn their neshamos, their insides, but will leave their bodies intact. Says the Gemara, Vaita Amar Rabbi Acha bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan, we're on the top of Kuf Yud Dalid Amud Aleph, Minayin L'Shinui Begodim Min HaTorah. Where do we know changing of the begodim is a respect to the king, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Shenemar, it says, Uposhat es begodov velovash begodim achirim. In regards to the fact that the Mizbeach becomes full with ashes, it has to be cleaned out every once in a while. And therefore, the Kohen who's going to clean out those ashes, he's going to have his garments become soiled. So therefore, he's to then change from his regular big day kuna to then big day kuna that were older. And it says, Poshat es begodav, he would take off those garments that he would normally wear. Velovash begodim acherim, he would wear the old, more worn out type of big day kuhuna. V'tan de Rabbi Yishmael, limedcha Torah derech eretz. The Torah is telling us derech eretz. Begodim she bishel bohen kideira l'raboy, al yim zoig bohen kois l'raboy. The clothing that the servant will then cook a pot in, since they will get soiled, therefore those are not the same garments that he's going to wear when he gives the drink to the king, and therefore to his master. And therefore the Kohen himself, although he will then wear certain older garments when it comes to then clearing out all of the ashes, but he will then change to bigadim acherim in regard to then doing the kitaras and the other avodah of the nisuch. Says the Gemara weiter, and therefore when it comes to Shabbos, we are like kohanim that change our garments. Even if a person is wearing a nice suit on Erev Shabbos, perhaps he had a bris, he was a bala bris, wearing Shabbos begadim, still he doesn't wear the same clothing that he's wearing on Friday into Shabbos. He changes his begadim that he's wearing during the week to then have new big day Shabbos. Says the Gemara weiter, Omer Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Genai hu letalmid chacham, sheyatze b'min olim hamutuloim lashuk. It's a disgrace for a talmid chacham to then go out to a public place, to the shuk, by wearing patches on his shoes. V'ho Rabbi Acha bar Chanina Nofik asked the Gemara, but Rabbi Acha bar Chanina, he did go out and he had patch on his shoes. Rabbi Acha bereid Rav Nachman bitlai al gabei tlai. He explained it wasn't the way that we're talking about. That's a genai. A genai is when you have patches on top of other patches. That's already considered to be a disrespect. That's something to be a genai, a disgrace for a talmid chacham to go out. But regular patches alone, that's not considered to be disgraceful. Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Rabbi Yochanan, kol talmid chacham shenimtza revav al bigdoi chayev misa. If a talmid chacham has a greasy stain on his garment, it's considered to be something that's going to mechayev him misa b'dei shomayim. Shenemar v'chol misanai ahavu moves. The pasuk says, all of those who hate me, who hate my Torah, Hashem says, then they will then have death. Al tikre misanoi ella masniai. Don't read those who hate me, but rather those cause people to hate me. Says Rashi, take a look at Rashi over here. When Rashi says, Ravav shumen v'chalav, if a person has a greasy type of stain, a talmid chacham, on his garment, Chaye Misa, says Rashi, shetzarich liyos chashuv v'hagun lichvoy tairosoi. The talmid chacham has to then appear to be chashuv because he's representing the Torah that he learns. Masniai, says Rashi, shema'asin atzmon be'enei abriyos. He's causing other people to become disgusted in the eyes of other people. Ve'habriyos oimrim oy lahem leloim deha Torah. Woe to those who learn the Torah. Shehem Mu'usim umugunim, because they are disgusting, he says, and disgraceful. Nimtza ze masni es ha-Torah. This causes people to then hate the Torah, because the talmid chacham represents the Torah that he is learning. Ravina Omar Rovad Itmar. He's not referring to a grease stain, but rather a stain of shichva zera. V'lo pligba is not a machloikis. It depends on where the stain is found. Ha beglima, ha belevusha. If it's a glima, an outer garment like a cloak, then it's referring to a grease stain. If it's an inner garment, then it's referring to a stain of shichvas zera. Says the Gemara weiter, another statement of Rabbi Chia bar Abba named Rabbi Yochanan. My dichsi, what's meant by the following pasuk? Kasher holach avdi Yeshaya arum v'yachif. Just like my servant Yeshaya went arum v'yachif. Did he go arum, literally naked, v'yachif, literally barefoot? Explains the Gemara, arum bibegadim beluim. He went with clothing that were worn out. V'yachif, and barefoot refers to b'min olim hamutuloim. Here it's referring to a situation where HaKadosh Baruch Hu davka commanded him to go in such a way. But as we said before, the talmid chacham has to be careful to not go in a way that will be disgraceful towards other people. It should be a kavod, the way he presents himself, for chashivus of the Torah. Tnan Hasom, it states over there in regards to a Mishnah in Mikvos, in regards to Tvilas Kalim, when you have Kalim that need to then become purified and then have to be nitbal in the mikvah, immersed in a mikvah, and they can't have a chatzitza, they can't have something that's separating that garment or that kli from the water. So says the Mishnah Tanhasom, Revav al hamardas chaytzitz. If there's a oil stain on the mardas, that's the blanket that goes underneath the saddle of a donkey, then that will make a chatzitza and will not be a valid tevila when you're matbil the mardas. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel oimer ad ki iser haitalki. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says it has to be at least the size of an iser haitalki, so the size of a coin. In other words, there's a machlokes. At which point do we say the Baal HaChamor is makbid, that it will be considered to be a stain that will then bring a chatzitza? If the Baal is makbid, then it's going to be chatzitza, and if not, then not. So in the Tanakama, any amount of a grease stain is considered to be a hakbara that the Baal will have when it calls a chatzitza. Whereas Hashem Gamliel says it has to have a minimum amount of a iser italki. Another Mishnah says v'hal begodim, in regards to then a beged that wants to be matbil in a mikvah. Mitzad echad eino chaytzitz, mishnei tzadim chaytzitz. If it's on one side a stain, then it's not making a chatzitza. However, if it has a stain on both sides, it's so deep that it goes into the other side of the garment, that's where the Baal will be makbid and will be chaytzitz. Rabbi Yehuda oimer mishum Rabbi Shimon Yishmael af mitzad echad chaytzitz. He's arguing, he says no, it doesn't have to go to the other side. As long as on one side it's a grease stain, that's enough to be chaytzitz on a person's beged. Ask the Gemara, boy minei Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish mi Rabbi Chanina. Mardas mitzad echad or mishnei tzdadim. That opinion that we just had, Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of Shmuel, that says even one side of a beged is enough to make a chatzitza. What about in regards to the mardas that we mentioned before? That mardas that has a stain, does it have to have on one side, and that's enough to make a chatzitza, or it has to go all the way through to the other side to then be considered to be a chatzitza? Or marlei zulo shomati. He said, I didn't hear an answer to this question directly. However, he says, Kiyoytze bo shomati. I did hear something similar. Disnan, it says in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosi oimer, shel banoin mitzad echod v'shel bur mishnei tzdodim. That beged of a banoin, we'll explain that to be Talmidei Chachamim are called banoin. They're the builders, and therefore they're makbid not to have a stain even on one side. Whereas a bur, referring to him as an am haaretz, he's only makbid if he has a stain that will go on both sides. And therefore you cannot say that the mardas, that blanket that goes on the chamor, is going to be more important, that the Baal HaChamor will be more makbid than the am haaretz with his own beged. And therefore you must say that it's two sides. There has to be a stain that goes through to the other side to make a chatzitza. Ask the Gemara, my banoin, that which it says over here in the Mishnah, referring to banoin, builders, what is it referring to? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, elu talmidei chachamim she'oiskin bebinyanoi shel oilam kol yameim. These are referring to talmidei chachamim who are busy being mekayim the world with their divrei Torah. They're building the world, like it says, im lo brisi yoimam valayla chukoi shamayim lo samti. If it wasn't for my covenant of the Torah that's going to be learned, then the shamayim va'arts cannot last, and therefore the talmidei chachamim are building the world ayidei, they're asik in Torah. Rabbi Yochanan then gives different conditions. What's considered to be Talmidei Chachamim? Ezu Talmid Chacham shemachzirin loy aveda betvias ha'ayin. What is a Talmid Chacham that you can return a lost object to him, even with tvias ayin, even with the ability for him just to say he can tell that this is his kli, this is his item that he lost, and you don't have to then ask for simonim like you would do in a normal situation. This is a Talmid Chacham who has a garment that might have been turned in the underside, and he then realizes it. He doesn't want that the seams to be seen on the outside. It would be a degradation to his kavod, and therefore he'd make sure to then turn over the garment that he's wearing it in the proper way. It shouldn't be inside out. What is it considered to be a Talmid Chacham that you can make him the leader of the tzibur? Va'afilu Maseches Kala. You can ask him a halacha anywhere, and he will be able to answer you even in Maseches Kala. In other words, whatever Maseches that he might be learning, you can ask him any question in that Masechta, and he will be able to then speak to you about that issue, about that topic. Even in regards to a Maseches that is less learned and less known, like Maseches Kala, and you would then be able to ask him about that, and he will know it. What's considered to be a Talmid Chacham that the Bnei Ir are commanded to then do malacha on his behalf, in other words, to be able to support him. He leaves his own needs and he's involved with the Cheftzei Shomayim. What are we talking about? Gemara qualifies that the ear supports such a Talmid Chacham who's busy with the Cheftzei Shomayim. Says the Gemara, Lemitrach berifte. In regards to his basic necessities like bread, that's what we're referring to over here, this Talmid Chacham. Now the Gemara goes on to say other conditions, what's considered to be a Talmid Chacham. You can ask him a question anywhere in the Talmud, and he can then speak to you about that topic. Lemay nafka mina, what would be the nafka mina, says the Gemara? Leminuye parnas ala tzibur, like we said before, to make him a manhig on the tzibur. If it's one Masechta, in other words, wherever he's learning that Masechta, then be'asrei, then he can be appointed a leader in that locale where he lives. If it's in the entire Talmud, you can ask him anything anywhere in the Talmud, even that which he's not currently learning, and he can go ahead and answer you on that topic and explain the issues. Bereish Masifta, you can make him to the Rosh Hashiva. Says the Gemara, Vaita Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Omar. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish argues on Rabbi Yochanan. We said that Rabbi Yochanan explains banoin, builders, to be Talmidei Chachamim. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish explains the word banoim is not referring to builders, but rather it's referring to bnei boni, referring to that which is those who are working in the bathhouses, referring to then kelim that they are using as follows. Elu kelim ha'ulyorin haboin mimidinas hayom. These are the kelim, referring to the garments of those who are running the bathhouses from Medinas Hayam. They get certain begadim that they put on those who come into their bathhouses, and those are special begadim that are coming from Medinas Hayam, special garments. That's who we're referring to over here, and they're the ones who are makbid not to have a stain beyond one side. If it's one side, it's already going to be a chatzitza because they're makbid. Not like Rabbi Yochanan, who was talking about a Talmid Chacham, who said they're makbid if it's a stain on one side. Rabbi Shimon Lakish refers to al yorin as being a special garment that the banoin, the bathhouse attendants, use when they put onto the people who then take the bath over there. That's the Gemara. Remember, the chivrininhu. This implies that they are white and therefore they're makpid. Does that mean that they're white? Ask the Gemara. Rabbi Yonai said to his children the following: Bonai, al tikberuni lo bekelim levonim v'lo bekelim shchorim. Don't bury me not in white shrouds or not in black shrouds. Levonim shemolo ezko ve'ye kichosim bein ha'avelim. White ones, because I don't want to be like a chassan amongst avelim, and therefore maybe he says I will be not zoiche to be amongst the tzaddikim. I might find myself in Gehenim, and therefore I don't want to be wearing white. It'll be inappropriate to be amongst those who are wearing black. Shchorin shema ezke ve'yeb ke'ovel bein chasonim, and the opposite. Don't clothe me in black shrouds, because maybe I will be zoiche to Gan Eden, where all the tzaddikim are who are wearing white, and therefore I'll be an ovel amongst all of the chasonim. Elo bekelim ha'ulyorin haboy medinas hayom. Rather, clothe me with ulyorin that come from medinas hayom. Alma. So we see from here, sumkeninhu, that Rabbi Yonah is telling him that he wants to be clothed in red type of garments. Answers the Gemara, Lokashia. Ha beglimi ha belevushi. In regards to those outer cloaks that he was referring to Rabbi Yonai and instructing his children to clothe him with, that's talking about an outer garment after it was dyed. But over here, we're talking about the ulyarin that they would put on the people who are taking a bath. Those are the inner garments, which is white before it is indeed dyed. And therefore, there's no steer between the two things. This is referring to over here the banoim as the kedim halyarin haboim medinas hayom.